Blakey's backyard was more than just overgrown. It was tangled and wild, with almost no hint of what lay beneath. It could have been that the 3-acre, mostly flat land hadn't been mowed for nearly a year, but something else was at play. The trees used to be sparse, revealing the slope to the creek half a mile away, but that view was blocked now with creepers. Moss swallowed everything, even the collapsed bones of a shed and a failed chain-link fence that used to defend its path of conquest. Yet nothing grew near the hearth of old stones he assembled to control the fires. The moss, weeds, and vines wove themselves into a wall, waiting for the area to be desanctified. In the day, birds, butterflies, and all manner of flying insects held court, and at night it was a symphony of sounds churning in the thicket. He always felt like the night creatures were applauding his fires, and tonight's 8-foot flames were particularly well received. It sounded like rehearsal for the 11th plague. Sitting in his rotting wood Adirondack chair, Blakey drank and watched the shape carcass feed the fire. He relished the clear, crisp night, the flames, and most of all his beer. Blakey had no immediate neighbors. It was too close to the middle of nowhere, so he let the fire dance high. On the rusty table next to him were the remnants of a fast food meal and the 2 Henderson books. A loud pop from the fire prompted Blakey to feed it. He gladly obliged, tossing them in, and the flames devoured the books with an appreciative crackling. Harry trotted over and planted next to him, clearly wanting something. After a long, ineffectual stare, the dog left and returned with his backyard water dish. He nudged it into Blakey's foot. "What?" Blakey asked, annoyed at the presumption. After no response from the dog, he added, "I told him to get a fish, you know." The dog continued his expectant stare. Blakey gave in and tossed the dog his bag of soggy fries. The dog scarfed the food in a few shakes and then focused back on the fire, the true source of tasty smells. A juicy part of the shape made a startling pop, and it snapped Blakey out of his trance enough to hear the pot rattling on the kitchen stove. Ah, the art project calls. A perfect excuse for another beer. In the kitchen, the steaming crock-pot was topped with a brown, foul-looking foam. He stirred lazily with a pair of tongs until the foam calmed. The TV was on in the living room. His daughter was sitting crisscross with her back to him, watching a nature special. She loved sitting on the blue sea of fuzzy shag. As soon as the pleasing image drew a smile from Blakey, he was immediately reminded of the surrounding disarray. Newspapers, pizza boxes, and mail were everywhere. One card pulled and it all fell down, he thought. He knew the wife would never allow this mess. Clutter or not, she would never come back. She was also a blind believer in hope. He had hope, but kept it close, balanced, realistic. The mirror over the couch was covered with a bedsheet and didn't help the mess. It wasn't for Shiva. He had gone to a few funerals when he married his wife, who was Jewish, and he had to ask why the mirrors were covered. This was not to cover physical reflection. He was more terrified of what was in the mirrors than of the shapes. The nature special Alice was watching was about snowshoe hares. There was a cage full of them waiting on a flatbed truck in the snow. The host, an overly enthusiastic British poser in a red parka, escorted the viewer and his crew to the truck, crunching the snow under their boots. A biologist laid one hare out on the bed of the truck. Blakey looked from the TV to Alice with his blunt, intoxicated stare and wondered where the remote was, but then remembered it hadn't been seen for months. "It's all right, Dad, they don't hurt 'em. They're safe," she pleaded. This repeated in his ears until the boiling pot began overflowing and sizzling on the burner. He turned off the gas and stabbed the tongs in to fish out the shape's bright skull. He looked at its dripping vacancy and couldn't decide which was more frightening, the alive or the underneath. He had tried several times to unmask them by carving them open and up, hoping to find some secret buried in their guts. But there was only ever muscle, tissue, and bone. Harry appeared for a sniff, hoping there was more food to be had. Blakey drained the skull over the sink and presented it to the dog. A cracked hole snaked from the top of the bowling ball-sized cranium to mid-snout, defining the path of destruction. The skull triggered a low growl from Harry. Blakey chuckled and lunged his prize at the dog, eliciting a snarl and defensive jump. Calm down, just playing. Blakey opened the basement door and headed down into the dark. The basement retained a damp, musty smell no matter how tidy things were. He didn't understand why he maintained this part of the house, but he knew he didn't like basements or being underground. It fogged his mind with a low-grade urge to flee. Blakey flipped on the lights, revealing an entire wall lined with shape skulls. There must have been at least 30. An art installation of perfect rows. He even used a level bar for the nails. All bright and clean, they gazed at Blakey with dead sockets. He joked, "Hello, boys, how's purgatory?" He could imagine them singing in response, Arthur Blakey, getting shaky. On too long with the same old song. Nigh high noon. He'll be hanging with us soon. They then rolled into laughter at a pitch that sharply disturbed him, sinking his pride in the project's completion. Blakey headed back upstairs, having to call the fixated dog away from the wall before closing the door. On the couch, drinking what he had promised himself was the final beer of the night, he read his own copy of Through the Looking Glass. He pet Harry's head, which was resting on his lap, and was at momentary peace. The nature special about snowshoe hares was over. Alice was lying on the floor and drawing. 10 p.m., bedtime was hours ago. Bedtimes had never been trouble with her. Blakey munched from the half-filled sand bucket of peanut M&Ms on the end table until he reached the end of the book. Not the true end, but the last page he hadn't torn out. After the final line of text, he declared, "And that's all he wrote. Well, at least that's all we can read without drumming up trouble, isn't it? A fine line, heal and hurt. Knowing your limits is what it's all about, right, Harry?" The dog wagged its tail when it heard its name. Blakey fearfully looked over to Alice, kneeling on the floor, finishing a drawing. She whipped around, brandishing the colourful image for him. It was a crayon Mad Hatter and March Hare standing together in flat 2 dimensions. She hopped up and went to the kitchen to put her drawing on the refrigerator with some of the many magnets. She then disappeared down the hall, just as the front door opened and 2 dark figures entered the living room, snickering and ushering in a foul smell.